Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the GGB Supplier Showcase. As always, I am your host, Jess Marquez, and I'm so pleased to be joined this morning by a fresh face of first-time guest, Derek Pando, Director of Product Marketing over at Relay. Derek, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Jess. Really excited to be here and appreciate you letting us have the opportunity to chat.
Awesome, awesome. Well, it's another beautiful day here in Southern California, and it's also opening day for all who celebrate, so I'm happy about that. Um, so to get down to business, I said at the top that this is your first time coming on the show, and to be honest, one of my favorite things about the Supplier Showcase series is that, it gives both myself and our viewers a chance to kind of learn more a little bit about the suppliers who kind of make things happen behind the scenes, and Relay is definitely a interesting example of that. So, kind of as a starting point, could you just kind of give us a little bit of background about Relay and kind of who you guys are and what you guys specialize in?
Sure. Yeah, we're a North Carolina based high growth tech company. And I think the easiest way to think about us is we are a next generation radio. Radios have not changed much in the last 50 years. And if you look across the casino industry, they're used all, for everything from housekeeping to security to slot managers. And so we've are modernizing and disrupting the radio space by having cellular and Wi-Fi based small lightweight devices. I even brought one, which I can show you and we can talk about um,
Okay.
uh, later. But they're got a lot of the same technology that you have in your smartphone. So bringing radios to the modern era.
Well, that's interesting because, basically, ever since casinos have been around, for the last six, 7+ decades, communication has been such a big part of operations, but it's kind of like you said, it's kind of stayed the same in a lot of ways, and it's also kind of imperfect. It's kind of like a necessary evil in a lot of sense. So, what are some of the biggest kind of challenges that you guys see in the industry today?
Yeah, well, I think before we dive into that, I have to
Sure.
acknowledge. So I'm relatively new to the casino industry,
Sure.
and I think it's worth calling out because you and probably many of your listeners, you're so in this, you don't realize, you don't think about it. Is just how incredibly dynamic uh, because a casino is as like a business and as a property, right? And I think that the high stakes, the increased security concerns, the 24/7 nature of it, that in and of itself just creates a lot of challenges when it comes to communication, right? When you compare it to other businesses, other organizations that may, communicate across, frontline teams and security teams. So I think we got to. That's kind of like the foundation of like some of the challenges of like it's just a really challenging dynamic environment. But then when I think about like the other kind of categories of communication challenges that we see, I'd say you can sum it up by just saying they're communication barriers, right? Like for whatever reason, you cannot communicate um, uh, how you need to or when you need to. And like if you think of like, all right, what are the subcategories from there? I think some of it can be cultural, right? Of like people don't feel like they can reach out to who can solve a internal or external issue the quickest. Like they don't feel empowered, or they don't have a culture where they will say, I see a problem, but I don't want to say anything because it might be weird or someone's gonna be offended or whatever. And then I also think there are also just pure like technological limitations of I can't get a hold of this person, or I don't have any connectivity in this part of my property. And then I'd say like the last bucket of like communication challenges we often see is there are barriers that are prohibiting teams from organizing in the way that makes sense for them. Uh, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, but I think you see this in um, you know the classic game of telephone where it's like, oh, I can't get a hold of who I need to, so I have to tell so and so who tells so and so, and every time that happens, a little bit's lost. It creates more confusion, creates less accountability, and so those are kind of the overall, I think, communication challenges that we've seen and that we like aspire to help resolve as we are trying to make changes in how casinos communicate.
Well, it's so fascinating, and I really think that this is like such a timely conversation, given some of the high profile incidents that we've seen across the industry that feature kind of both of those elements that you said, both technological elements and kind of like interpersonal cultural elements, because we unfortunately we know that bad actors can kind of prey on both of those aspects. So I think that's definitely a timely conversation for sure. So if we kind of flip the coin then, conversely, what do you see as best in class or kind of like cutting edge communication in a casino today?
Yeah, I think the best, the casinos that we see, and we have a lot of interesting data that we can see, behind the scenes that helps us understand like what best in class looks like. So I think the most critical thing we see is just actually a high volume of communication, right? Like for you to address, whether it's a guest need or a security incident, like you need to be communicating constantly. And it's not just like, oh, am I talking all the time? But am I getting like, the cross departmental communication? Like, can the F&B team reach out to security because of something that they've seen? Can the valet team, communicate that there is a, high roller that just pulled up on site and being able to, uh, cater to, anticipate their needs. Um, but some of it like is surprising. Like we have a customer in a tribal casino in Washington State that, they talked about how, a lot of times tribal casinos, they have very large properties, multiple businesses, and they were talking about how oftentimes they had members of their staff running between like the restaurant, the kitchen, the food truck, like literally like physically running, right? And that's not necessary. Like they need to communicate. And once, they were able to, upgrade their communications solution, they were able to do that. Um, I also think so that just eliminating barriers of like not being able to, to get a hold of who you want when you want. The other kind of thing that we see is um, predefined set workflows for different kinds of incidents um, that most people have like an emergency or it's like a security workflow, but there's other things that like, well, what happens if there's like a massive spill like in the restaurant, and having predefined, this is who needs to know, and this is like, and this is how they're going to be brought into those conversations, so that you're not figuring it out on the fly. It's like, let's hit the button. We have, this kind of incident, boom, the workflow's in place and people don't have to think about it and they can get directly to solving the problem. I think that's something else best in class. And then also the flip side of the cultural, challenges. I've been in like security operations centers, and I've, been on site with casinos, and a mantra that I've heard at a lot of high performance casinos are, see something, say something. And like their teams feel empowered and they're not embarrassed, like if they to nothing's too small, and no one makes them feel bad about uh bringing a concern, whether that be, I think these might be drugs in a hotel room, or there's a light bulb out in this hallway, right? Like you want people to feel empowered and comfortable and have the pass to communicate those things. And I think best in class communication across casinos, the employees feel that empowerment, and and sometimes they're trained. Like I was listening to a panel where they talked about they were concerned that housekeepers weren't speaking up about potential drugs in a hotel, in that they might encounter. But they found out it was because they didn't know what they look like, and they're like, oh, like, maybe that's something else. I don't want to assume the worst. I don't want to, raise a red flag if so the team actually did training that empowered them to feel confident in when and how they should communicate. So those are some of the like ways that I see communicate casino communications that are best in class.
Well, and that's so fascinating. I'm really enjoying this conversation because this is exactly what I was saying at the top, where, stuff like this doesn't often get talked about in the sense that security and surveillance is one of those operations in a casino where it's like you want it, you expect it to run smoothly, and the only time you really hear about it is when it's not.
Right, right.
Um, And, especially, and I think it's interesting also that you mentioned, the tribal side as well, because it really goes, it touches every aspect of the industry, both commercial and tribal, that they both have, um, there's such an arms race now, to kind of provide these like insane level of customer experience, or I should say guest experience. And, it's obviously things like that are part of it, the small details, like not even just so much the security part, but just other communication details, like you said, like a light being out, like a spill in a restaurant, things like that. And those are like the kind of like little details that kind of, when you're up at the upper echelon like that, it's like what separates, the really best in class. These multi-billion dollar resorts can kind of come down to the smallest things like that. And the communication is such a key part of it. So if we move now to obviously your guys' is part of it, which
Mhm.
I'm fascinated to hear about because I've seen you guys around a lot lately, and I'm not saying that just because you're on the guest. I have seen you guys mentioned a lot in a lot of different spaces, so I'm really curious to see it a little bit firsthand. So, what exactly does a next generation radio such as Relay enable guests to do that is not possible with the existing systems?
Yeah, yeah. I think where we usually start is connectivity.
Okay.
Um, a radio operates on radio waves, generally speaking, and that has its challenges. These devices, relay devices, which you see here,
Hmm.
they operate over cell and Wi-Fi. So that creates some redundancy in that. Let's say you're on one side of your property and you're connected to cell service, but then you go back of house and there's no cell service because you're in a dungeon basically, and
Hmm.
but you have Wi-Fi. These devices are able to kind of seamlessly go back and forth. You don't have to do anything. If you try to communicate, it will automatically, oh, where we have the strongest signal. And it goes beyond just cell too, like because we connect to all three major carriers in one device. So let's say on
Wow.
one side of your facility, AT&T is the strongest, and the other side is Verizon or T-Mobile. That will all seamlessly in the background. You won't have to do anything, but you will just experience a higher rate of connectivity and a lot less of like, are you there? I can't get a hold of so and so, or I can't reach out. Um, so that's a big way in that we are different. And when you think about like what we're relying on, cellular and Wi-Fi, that is all infrastructure that benefits your guest experience as well. So the more you improve your Wi-Fi, the more you improve your cell service, your guests are happier, and the better your connectivity is. That is not the same with radio. Oftentimes casinos have to spend so much money on infrastructure that only benefits radios, which none of that does not touch their guests. And so for us, that is a paradigm shift that we believe is the future. Like you want to invest in infrastructure that improves your guest experience always. Every casino you talk to is thinking about their cell and Wi-Fi service, but then these relay devices can build off of that for what we see is generally broad, better connectivity across a property, which eliminates those barriers. One common barrier we talked about earlier, Jess, is like I literally can't get a hold of someone. That also enables like unlimited range. So we have lots of examples of, hey, I'm a security person and I need to run to the bank. I'm still in constant communication with my team because even though it's 10 or 100 miles down the road, um, that is also an artificial barrier that we've had from the limits of radio technology that now we find that our customers value, and they can communicate through these relay devices, but they also communicate through desktop or an app. So a lot of our senior leaders, they on their phone, they want to be able at any time to tap into and hear what's happening across the different parts of the facilities. Um, I think the other ways that kind of we're differentiating, and I think that have uh, contributed to a lot of our traction is that there is a lot of safety enhancements built into this. So like not only is like the communication encrypted, so you don't have to worry about, you know, the construction crew down the street, interfering with your radio channel, but it's also a built-in panic button. So if I hit this middle button 5 times, it'll initiate a panic workflow that you've described. And because these are smart devices, they have GPS location tracking, so we know where people are. And even further, if you want to know where people are at a room level, we have Bluetooth beacons that many facilities install so that if I hit this emergency, we will not only know an emergency is initiated, who it is, but where they are down to the room level, which is a real comfort. We've seen a lot of industries have uh, panic button mandates. So this is kind of where the industry is headed overall. But where we try to, or where we believe a little bit different than some of the other vendors out there, is that panic is best combined with communication, because if a panic is initiated, you just don't want to, like, you want to know what the heck is going on, and you're going to need people, and that requires communication. Yeah, and then the last thing I'd say, but that, like, I think is what has made Relay different and made the lives of, a lot of the casino professionals that use us, is, this is like an easy to use, this is software based. So easy to use dashboard that you can go in, and if you want to spin up a channel, for an event, you can do that automatically. You have unlimited amounts of channels. That goes back to the artificial barriers of before we had 10 radio channels, and so they were all designated. You can have a channel for 2 people, 3 people, like whatever you want. There's not that artificial limitation. And because of that, we can do awesome things like we can automatically record and transcribe. And when we talk to security professionals about, like, after incident reports, they don't have to guess, like, what did our employees say and when did they say it. They have it there. And we've heard so often that has resolved and brought clarity to a lot of challenging situations, because we know exactly what our employees were saying. We know where they were, and has helped, mitigate some of the risk inherent in such a complex, dynamic environment.
Wow. I mean, that's pretty, that's pretty inclusive. And I think one of the things that, aside from the communicative aspects of it, I think the GPS tracker is one of the things that I thought was extremely interesting. I saw some images of, like, the layout maps with, like, the different dots and
Yeah.
such, and I think, like you said, down to the room level, especially, you have a property that has 7,000 rooms, you know what I mean? That's pretty impressive. And so, and also, just a bit of a clarification. So the transcribe, that's always, like, that can pick up anything, or that, like, what exactly is that? Because that's very interesting to me. I never heard that.
Yeah, you can set it up. So if there's a channel
Okay.
where you're like, yeah, I want to automatically record and transcribe all the communication that's happening on here, great. And we'll do
Wow.
that in real time. If you don't want that to happen, you can also, like, it's kind of up to, but we found, especially for security teams, this is very valuable, because when something happens, they need to unpack what it was, and to best resolve those issues, and to improve, and to also learn from them and improve. And then also, even in some settings, there are compliance requirements that require you to do that. And, a lot, we've talked to casinos that are doing that in really kind of janky, expensive ways of, like, plugging in something to something else, and, make it just difficult and complex. And so, our hope in the automation of that is that, people can spend more time doing the higher value parts of their job, not like the paperwork, essentially.
Oh, wow, that's really fascinating. So, if we look ahead now, and I'm also excited to hear about this as well, as you guys are just announced a lot of new enhancements to go along with that, including a live translator, which I'm pretty
Yeah.
fascinated about. So, could you tell me about all those new things up and coming?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I think for your listeners too, I think it's worth clarifying. Like, this is a paradigm shift. Like, your
Hmm.
radio, you buy it and it, like, does not get better. But because these are software-based devices, like, we are constantly rolling out enhancements. And so a couple ones that we're most excited about. I'll start with the one you just mentioned. We call it Team Interpreter. So already built into Relay devices is like a pocket translator that operates a lot like, Google Translate on your phone, where you can say audio and it'll translate it. But we just launched Team Interpreter, which enables you to, in real time, speak with your team in other languages. So this is how it would work. Like, let's say, I'm the director of housekeeping, and I've got 20 members of my staff, and 10 of them are not super comfortable in English, and it's across 4 or 5 different languages that they speak. If I'm the director of housekeeping and I say, "Hey, we urgently need, someone to go to room 310," they will hear that through my relay. They will hear that in English, and then they will also hear it immediately afterwards in the designated language that they've set for their device.
Wow.
So all simultaneously. So if it's, Mandarin and Spanish and Portuguese, that's all they're all going to hear it in their own language. And then the same thing if they speak back. They I will hear it in their native, in whatever language they're speaking, and then it will automatically be translated to English for me if my language is in English. And for us, like
Wow.
the motivation behind this has been um, uh, the language barriers are real, and that directly impacts the bottom line because it limits who you can hire, it limits who you can promote, it limits who you can put on staff at certain times. And we, by building this automatically into how people communicate, we think that's going to give casinos more flexibility in, okay, I can have a broader hiring pool. I don't have to be so focused on some language skills. I can promote people even if maybe they're not as bilingual or multilingual as we would have preferred before, because I can still do my job by communicating directly through these relay devices.
Wow. I mean, that really is fascinating, and that's I mean, that's even better than I would have imagined. You know what I mean? When I think that something like that is like you said, extremely practical and also translates directly to everything else. I'm just like processing it in my head right now. That's really impressive. Um,
We'll
well,
have to show it to you sometime. When we meet in person, I will show you the devices. We can play around with it. It's definitely one of those things that you kind of don't. It's hard to believe until you see it, but like
yeah.
it's real, and we have real customers that are using it today. That's in solving some of those language challenges.
Well, and I think especially just given the fact that like we've said like we've said a couple times before now is like especially when you just compare it to the existing systems, a lot of like simple walkie-talkies and simple old analog radios and stuff like that. This is like you said a whole different shift to a completely different a different reality. So that's very impressive. And I've been very I've been looking forward to this conversation just to kind of hear more about it because like I said I've heard a lot of buzz about it and I think it's well warranted. And I understand that you guys also have some new developments regarding guard patrols as well.
Yeah, we just launched a new enhancement called rounds, and if you have regularly scheduled security or guard rounds, um, i- keeping track of it is usually not the best, most high value part of it. Like whether you do it on paper or in a spreadsheet or software or whatever it is, it's time consuming for the security professionals doing it and their managers. And we realize that with these devices being smart and intelligent, and are we are now able to actually automate the tracking and reporting around. So this is like how it would work. We have our indoor Bluetooth beacons that let us know if on a room level if someone's having you can hit a panic button and we'll know where they are. But what that can mean is if there's like, let's say you need to check the stairwell every 6 hours. So that's part of your, safety pattern. You can set up indoor Bluetooth beacons so that when a security guard carrying the relay walks by, it will automatically register that that area has been seen. And you can set it up so that, let's say, someone has not touched it in 6 hours, you can automatically alert whoever you want, whether that be the security guard on duty or the manager, to make sure that they are compliant with what you want to have happen. And our goal with this is like just to cut out all the manual processes and make it intelligent so that people can if they miss around, they get an alert and they can go and make it happen. And you don't have to wait 3 days later to when you're looking at the sign-in sheet to realize what happened. And also just the effort that it takes. Like there's other solutions today where like you scan a QR code or you enter it into an app, but like all they would literally have to do is walk by it and it would register that automatically. So we're really excited about that. A lot of we've been working closely with some of our beta customers who this has been a big pain point for them, and so we're glad that this is launched and generally available. And we think for the heightened security needs of casinos, this will hopefully take a administrative load off their shoulders.
Wow, and that's definitely an extremely organic and actionable way, like you said, to reduce those redundancies, excuse me. And that again, it's like we've said multiple times, it translates, to your bottom line as well. You're cutting back on a lot of those manual processes, and that's really fascinating as well. That's all I have for you today, Derek. Again, thank you so much for coming on. And I think, that these types of technology really speaks to the broader shift. I always say that I'm grateful to have been in the industry at this time in particular because we are seeing so many just huge shifts away from how it was for so long. I mean, whether it's cashless payment systems, mobile check-in systems, things like that. Obviously now it's stuff like you guys with your new communication technologies. I mean, it really is just a fascinating time for the industry, and especially thanks to innovators such as yourself. So thank you so much. And where can people find out more if they're interested in your services?
Yeah, go to relaypro.com, our website. We are always happy to chat, and we are always all over the country and on site with our customers. So the odds, if you reach out and you want us to stop by and show you some of the things that we've talked about today, are high. And yeah, just totally agree. Like, I think this is really an exciting time where like technology can actually help with our communication and safety in ways that just help not only the employees at casinos, but also their guests, so that they have like a better and safer experience. So yeah, appreciate y'all spending the time with us. It's been awesome. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me as well, and I'll definitely be looking out to see the growth of Relay because I'm sure it'll take off, and I'm curious to see where it goes from here. So thank you again.
Thank you for joining us for the GGB Gaming Supplier Showcase, our exclusive look at the best products and services produced by vendors for the gaming, iGaming, and sports betting industries. For more information about the GGB Supplier Showcase, contact Terry Brady at tbrady@ggbmagazine.com.